Have you ever wondered who are the modern-day pioneers of hairdressing? Who are these people that create shapes and styles and fashions and influence women's value of beauty on a global level? I'm not just a hairdresser who's going to answer all of those questions. We're going to explore the legends, the heroes of our industry, who had the courage, the bravery, the vision to explore new ideas and concepts in beauty. These are the people who will share their story from rags to riches with us, telling us what it took to go from a simple beginning to a great empire, and how through their inspiration, it gives us hope and light that we may too do something extraordinary in our careers. These great legends touched my heart in such a profound way that I so much wanted to share this documentary with you. Whether you've been in the industry for 30 years or you're a newcomer, you're going to see a wonderful journey of fashion and trends and some really incredible stories that have really changed how I see my life and how I see this art. And they, more than anyone else, have confirmed for me that I'm not just a hairdresser. I am a hairdresser.
I think if you degrade a craft and laugh at it and joke at it, as has been for so many decades, the people in it start to get a feeling that they're okay, but not really in something that they should be in. They should be in something that has a much wider appeal in the sense of respect. But I try to talk to people about that what if you do it terribly well? I mean, if you're a plumber and you're the best damn plumber, you deserve respect. If you're a hairdresser and you're very good at it, you do so much for so many people that you're not just a hairdresser, you are a hairdresser.
I'm very proud to say I'm a hairdresser. We actually are very important people in many different ways. We can make people feel good. There may be an outer skin to our body, but there's an inner soul and there's inner depths. And I think if we can make somebody, I know what it's like to feel good. I also know what it's like to feel not good. And we can actually make people feel good. It's called cosmetic, but it goes far deeper than the skin. It can actually reach the soul.
Just a hairdresser. Yeah, I can remember saying it myself. Many people perceive. By cutting hair, you're not using your brain, but you are, because when you're sectioning things off and you're dealing with weight and distribution, you become a bit more, should we say, like a tailor or a draftsperson. And I always looked at doing hairdressing as a draftsperson. There was the head, I'd section it, work it out, and everything was mathematically done. I'd work out what needed to be here, and I'd spend hours doing it. So I had to have an idea of math and composition in order to be successful at doing hair.
If you're not misunderstood, you're not doing your job. You're not being creative. The eye is a fascinating thing. Very often, most people, it takes 2 years to get hold of a new idea, to be able to see it, and to understand it. They can't understand a new idea immediately. None of us can. So, being misunderstood is part of being intuitively forward-thinking.
I'm very fragile as a person. I'm very sensitive, and I remember you saying once somebody can look at your work and just raise an eyebrow, and it can just be like a knife going into your heart because it was not what you wanted to hear or see or feel. And I'm like that. I can be so vulnerable in so many ways, like an eggshell, really.
It's the only art form that takes a bone structure, a face, and with the substance growing from that face, cuts and shapes and creates angles or curl or whatever. And the whole essence with color, very often with perm, but definitely with cut. You create something where you see that glint in that person's eye, and you know you've changed something in their life for them, for that moment. I mean, you're not a psychiatrist, you haven't changed their life, but you've done something for them that's made them terribly happy. What other art form is there where you can work one-on-one with another human being and create something for them that gives you so much pleasure?
I do 10 clients a day when I do clients, and I get 10 hits. And, you know, there's very few jobs where you start and finish a job. Most jobs, you're a part of an end result. I still get the buzz of watching somebody go, God, I feel really good, you know, bang, you know, that's a hit for me.
I just don't think the public really recognize the ability of a hairdresser simply for the fact that the wage structure on a salon down the road may charge $5, and then you go 3 miles down the road and it may be $350. So the person charging $5 may say, I'm just a hairdresser, but the person charging $350 may say, I'm a designer.
I think Sartre said it beautifully when he said, we are all condemned to be free, which is a terrifying thought. It gives you goosebumps, doesn't it? Condemned to be free. Because most people like to be herded, like to be part of the crowd. And the freedom that that certain individual may have to go their own way and intuitively create is something that they're lucky to be born with. I don't think you can be taught that in any school.
I was 14 when I started doing hair. I wasn't very good at maths at school, so you can have to work that one out for yourself. It's like 37 or 8 years. I never wanted to be a hairdresser, for starters. I never even dreamt of it. My dad was a hairdresser, a barber, and my grandfather was a he was called a professor of hair, and he used to work in the colleges in Glasgow and teach hairdressing, and he was called a professor of hair in those days. How I got into it was quite accidental. I was at school and I wanted to be an artist, a painter, and I was getting bullied at school by the PE teacher, and I was 15 at the time, and I just had enough. I mean, I was only good at 3 subjects at school, and that was art, sport, and girls. And I was really good at girls. I should have taken that one up. Well, I kind of did, really, with hairdressing. But no, so anyway, I said to my dad, I said, look, I want out. I said, I need to get out of school. I can't hack this anymore. He said, so what are you going to do? And I said, well, I don't know. I'll get a job in a factory like my mates. So he said, well, come and help me in the barber shop and see how you like that. And I was already doing Saturday work with him at the age of 14, sweeping the floor and shampooing and stuff. So I went into the barber shop, and within 3 months, I was actually cutting people's hair.
My mother, literally at 14, during World War II, 1942, took me by the hand and said, son, you're going to be a hairdresser. I at first didn't understand what was going on, you know. All I knew there was some wonderful, pretty girls around the place, and it was worth keeping the job through that alone.
My parents sent me to a school in London called the Richard Henry School of Hairdressing, and it was a 6-month course, and it cost £100 in those days. And on the last day of leaving the Richard Henry School of Hairdressing, he said to me, I see something in you, and I want you to go to a good house. He said, I'm going to send you to either Leonard, who was big in the late 60s, early 70s, Vidal Sassoon, or Helena Rubinstein. And he sent me to Vidal Sassoon. And I did a test, and they interviewed me, and I got the job, but I had to do training. And for a month, I stayed there because they weren't paying me. I was traveling 2 hours to work, 2 hours to get home, and quite frankly, I wasn't that into it. So I quit, and I went to the suburbs, and that's where I learned hairdressing.
I didn't really become totally fascinated with hairdressing. I wanted to learn, but I didn't become totally fascinated until the age of 22, after having many, many jobs, leaving it, spending a year in Israel, coming back. At 26, when I opened my own place, I knew, and that was in 1954, gotta make changes. And funny enough, I considered if I couldn't do it, if I didn't see any progress within 5 years, I'd give it up and do something else. It wasn't, to me, a business. It wasn't anything except an art form. It was a way of creating my art form, my form of shapes, with a substance called hair, instead of using clay or metal, or sculpting in whatever you sculpt in stone. And I had the benefit of having wonderful faces and bone structures underneath. So the whole thing became architectural, inspired by Bauhaus, inspired by a sense of change. It took 9 years. It was probably the most exciting time of my life.
I fell into hairdressing simply because I went to art college and I wasn't quite good enough, or wasn't really interested in it. So my father decided I need to get a job. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Unbeknown to me, the very next day, there was a knock on the door, and this person said, hello, my name is Mr. Lee, and you're coming to work for me today. And I went, all right. I looked at my dad, and he looked at me, and I got the message. My first few days, I watched people cut hair, and I was clueless, and I really didn't want to do this. I had no interest in it whatsoever. I really didn't know what I was doing, but I wanted to sort of progress, and I got an opportunity to interview another Robert Fielding salon as a junior stylist. At the time, I could only do 2 haircuts. That's all I could do. So when I went for the interview and they said to me, we'll get you the model, I thought, oh no, I can only do 2 haircuts. They're gonna pick something I can't do. Well, sure enough, luck for me was one of the heads they picked for me was the only haircut I could do. I cut this head of hair and it went in like a dream. And they went, you're really good. And I went, yeah. Right.
From 54 to 63 was dynamite because it was slow. We'd finish the clients about 5:30, go for a break, have some early dinner, come back and work on models. It became our hobby. It was something that we had to do, and I say we because I was training a team and they were with me. Eventually wonderful people like Roger Thompson and Christopher Booker came, but they weren't there in those very, very early days. I wouldn't tease, I wouldn't backcomb. People would say, but this is the way I want it. I'll make a phone call. I have very good friends who do that kind of work, and I'll get you a cab. But I wouldn't compromise.
This was the beginning for me of the beginning of hairdressing, where I really learnt hairdressing, because Ricky's foundation being from Sassoons, but his love of hairdressing and the ability that he had as a hairdresser and understanding what magazines wanted, and he had a lot of editorial clout, so he had a whole section of hairdressers that would just go and do editorial. So I used my hands, my eye and my mind to get the best out of me. That's when I found I really was enjoying hairdressing, when I had total control over it, when I was no longer fearful of going to a session and thinking, oh God, what happens if the model's only got 3 hairs, or she's got 5,000 hairs and they want it in something that I'm not so keen on, or I'm not going to agree with this, or I can't see it that way. Once that had gone, I'd gone past that and my confidence was really high, I was at peace with myself and my own abilities, because the confidence within me pushed over to actual job I was doing, and it came out there, and then people would say, okay, Rob, do whatever hair you want, because we got confidence in you, and that made me feel so good.
I was in this South Market Street salon one day trying this one-length haircut, just one length, but cut really short, round the hairline, and it just looked hard, and I thought, the French aren't going to like this, because you've got to be a bit softer for the French. And I thought, well, that hasn't worked at all. So just by chance, I brushed it back to sort of try and get something out of it. And I just noticed that this hair was just going out like almost like a pyramid sort of shape. And all this underneath was sort of supporting the top layers. And Christopher Brooker was in the salon that day, the international artistic director. And I said, Chris, come have a look at this. It's quite nice what I've done. And he came over and he went, we'll photograph that. I said, really? And in those days, to have a Vidal Sassoon photograph, you know, not done by either Roger or Christopher or Vidal was, you know, a big thing, certainly in my books. And it was the first haircut that ever received a double-page spread in English Vogue. And I think the feeling that went through my body at that time was, if I can do that once, I can do it again.
When hairdressing really clicked for me, I think I must have been the age, I think it was between the age of 27, 28, because then I'd experienced having a salon, doing editorial, I'd worked on film, I'd done pop videos, I'd done celebrities, I taught all over the world, done everything I could do in hairdressing. And what that meant to me is fundamentally, my hands were in total control.
Most of it comes from that sense of gut, and you're cutting shapes and angles, and suddenly things started to happen. But it took 9 years before we got into that full geometric, before we came out with the 5-point cut and the Nancy Kwan bob. And of course later on was the cut and the perm, which was the Greek goddess, you know, which should have been called the afro. You get scared because you're not sure whether you're going to pay the rent next month. And you start from nothing, and you're always creating collections to take to Paris and Milan and New York, which we did, meaning having to beg the bank manager, please, I need 10,000 pounds, are you crazy? Yes, but I've got to get this collection together. In those days, it was an absolute fortune. You know, Mary Quant came in 1957 to the small salon, because we moved in 58 to a larger one. And I never forget it, because I cut her earlobe. There's blood dripping and all that, you know, and her husband, Alexander Plunkett Green, said, I said, you charge extra for that. It was terribly English, to charge extra for that. You know, oh boy, you know. And we became very firm friends. And Mary and I worked together forever while we were still working, physically, both of us still working. We'd work together, I'd do her shows, she'd dress our shows, and it's a wonderful combination because, you know, she was the leader there in Britain of that whole new cult, in a sense, you know, which is quite wonderful. There were so many people who wanted to come and try. Fortuitously, the English are like that. They want to be different. So they did come in and try. And it was also the days of Mary Quant. So we were part of that whole group. It was controversial, which was lovely. I mean, some people loved our work, some people hated it. Marvelous. Created controversy.
Every so often in life, there's a kind of a flip, and there's a change of attitude, and it's usually to do with the youth. And I think the next sort of revolution, if you like, was punk, which started a whole new wave of thinking. But in those days, in the sort of late 60s, 70s, it was brand new, never been seen before. But it wasn't just hair. There was the Beatles, you know, there was music, the Rolling Stones, there was that side of it. There was fashion with Mary Quant, with mini skirts, you know, that was brand new. There was photography, people like David Bailey, Donovan, Duffy, people like that. So it wasn't just a hair thing, it was a creative force that was striving to do something different that had never been seen before. And being in that was electrifying. I haven't really lived through an era since. Quite like it.
That was an unnerving time, but London was really a great place because hairdressers, I think, were becoming celebrities. And I wanted to feel like that. I wanted to be a celebrity, and I looked at all my peers in front of me, and they looked like celebrities. So it was a great place to be and a good time to be in. So for me, it was the perfect time to become a hairdresser.
Suddenly the kids had cash. They were earning it. And they wanted to create their look.